Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UN's Perseverance, watching the stars shift around them as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. After 3 months of journey, they have finally reached Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Confederation. Her heart pounded with excitement and nerves. This was humanity's first real contact with alien civilizations, and she carried the hopes of 8 billion people on her shoulders. "We're receiving a signal, Captain," said Lieutenant Chun from the communications station. "They're guiding us to a specific docking station." Elena nodded. Through the main screen, she could see Nexus Prime growing larger. The planet was beautiful beyond imagination. Massive cities floated in the sky, connected by bridges of pure light. Ships of impossible shapes moved between them like schools of fish. Some looked like crystal formations, others like flowing water frozen in time. "Remember, everyone," Elena said to her crew. "We represent all of humanity today. Let's show them what we're made of." The docking process was smooth. As soon as they attached to the station, Elena felt the artificial gravity shift slightly. The aliens had adjusted it to match Earth's gravity, which was a good sign. Maybe they really did want to welcome humanity into their community. Elena walked down the docking tube with her small team. Ambassador Liu carried a case filled with gifts from Earth, music, art, and samples of human literature translated into the common galactic language. Dr. Martinez brought records of human scientific achievements and medical discoveries they hoped to share. The reception area was vast and gleaming. Aliens of different species moved about their business, some floating, others walking on legs that bent in impossible directions. But what struck Elena most was how they all moved with purpose and calm. There was no rushing, no shouting, no chaos. Everything seemed perfectly organized. 3 figures approached them. The first was tall and thin, almost like a living shadow with glowing blue eyes. This was Ambassador Kefter Velden, representing the Kefter species. The second looked like a walking crystal formation, each movement creating tiny musical sounds. This was the Vorthok representative Xanthic. The third was smaller, with smooth gray skin and large black eyes, a member of the Zilani delegation. "Welcome, humans," said Volden, his voice flowing like water. "We are curious about your species. Come, the council awaits." They walked through corridors filled with wonders. Elena saw walls that showed moving pictures of distant worlds. Plants that glowed with their own light grew in perfect patterns. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy. The council chamber was enormous. 12 different alien species sat in a circle, each delegation more strange and wonderful than the last. Elena felt small and primitive in comparison, but she held her head high. Humanity had earned the right to be here. "Humans of Earth," said Velden, now wearing elaborate robes that seemed to be made of starlight. "You have requested membership in our confederation. This is a serious matter. We must first understand what you are." Elena stepped forward. "We come in peace and friendship. Humanity has much to offer. We've brought examples of our art, our music, our science. We hope to learn from you and share what we know." "Yes," said Xanthic, the crystal being. His voice sounded like wind chimes. "We have studied your transmissions, your entertainment broadcasts, your news reports, your history files. Most interesting." Something in his tone made Elena nervous, but she pressed on. "We know we're young compared to your civilizations. We've made mistakes, but we've learned from them. We're ready to join the galactic community." "Indeed," said another voice. This came from a being that looked like liquid metal in a rough humanoid shape. "Let us show you what we have learned about your species." The air in the center of the chamber began to glow. Images appeared, floating in 3 dimensions. Elena gasped as she saw Earth's history playing out before them. But these weren't the images she would have chosen to represent humanity. The aliens showed human wars. Bombs falling on cities. Soldiers fighting in muddy trenches. Nuclear explosions turning landscapes into wastelands. The images moved through time. Ancient battles with swords and spears. Modern conflicts with tanks and aircraft. Even the recent colonial disputes on Mars. Your species, said Veldon, has spent most of its existence in conflict. You fight over resources, over ideas, over land. Even now, as you reach for the stars, you carry weapons. Elena felt heat rising in her cheeks. Yes, we've had conflicts. But we've also had peace. We've had cooperation. We've created beautiful art, amazing music, incredible science. We've helped each other through disasters and diseases. Have you? Asked Xanthic. New images appeared. These showed humans in laboratories, testing weapons of incredible destruction. Factories pumping poison into rivers. Cities covered in smog. You have nearly destroyed your own world multiple times. How can we trust you with others? Dr. Martinez stepped forward. Every species makes mistakes as it develops. We've learned from ours. Our environmental programs have cleaned up much of the damage. We've created international laws to prevent the worst conflicts. We're better now than we were. Better? The liquid metal being seemed to laugh, though it made no sound. Show them the test results. More images appeared, but these were different. They showed the inside of human minds, somehow made visible. Elena saw emotions swirling like storms. Anger, fear, love, hatred, all mixed together in chaotic patterns. Compared to the calm, ordered thoughts of the alien minds shown beside them, human brains looked like they were in constant turmoil. Your species, said Veldon, is driven by primitive emotions. You make decisions based on feeling rather than logic. You form attachments that cloud your judgment. You are willing to sacrifice everything for abstract concepts like honor and loyalty. Those aren't weaknesses, Elena protested. Those are our greatest strengths. Love, loyalty, courage. These drive us to achieve great things. Great destructive things, perhaps, said Xanthic. Your history shows that these emotions lead to violence and chaos. The Confederation has maintained peace for 3,000 years precisely because we have moved beyond such primitive responses. The chamber fell silent. Elena looked around at the 12 delegations, hoping to see some sign of support. But every alien face, or what passed for faces, showed the same expression of calm disapproval. Finally, Veldon spoke. The Galactic Confederation hereby rejects the application of humanity for membership. Furthermore, we declare that humanity shall remain within its home system. Any attempt to establish colonies or expand beyond Earth's solar system will be met with appropriate measures. Elena felt like she had been punched in the stomach. You can't be serious. We've traveled so far, worked so hard. The decision is final, said Veldon. Your species is too dangerous, too unpredictable. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when you have evolved beyond your current primitive state, we will reconsider. Until then, you will remain quarantined. The meeting was over. Elena and her team were escorted back to their ship in silence. As they prepared to depart, Elena stood at the window, looking back at the beautiful city floating in space. Tears ran down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of anger and determination. This isn't over, she whispered. Someday, we'll show you what humanity is really capable of. 3 years had passed since humanity's rejection by the Galactic Confederation. The news had hit Earth like a bomb, causing riots in some cities and despair in others. But humans had always been good at adapting to bad situations. And this time was no different. Dr. James Chun worked late into the night in his laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps. Around him, Dozens of scientists studied the few pieces of alien technology they had managed to scan during their brief visit to Nexus Prime. They couldn't copy the technology exactly, but they could understand some of the principles behind it. "The energy patterns are fascinating," said Dr. Park, looking at holographic displays floating above her desk. "They use quantum fields in ways we never thought possible." James nodded, wiping tired eyes. "Keep working on it. If we're stuck in this solar system, we need to make the most of what we have." On the other side of Earth, Admiral Sarah Okafor stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching live feeds from human colonies throughout the solar system. Mars had 3 major cities now. Europa's underwater colonies were thriving. Even the asteroid miners had built small communities in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. "Ma'am," said Colonel Rodriguez, "the new ship designs are ready for testing. Fast, tough, and built for small crews like you requested." Sarah smiled grimly. "Good. We might need them sooner than we think." She didn't know how right she was. Far away, on the edge of known space, something ancient was stirring. The Devourers had been sleeping in the dark between galaxies for millions of years. They were not organic life forms, but machine intelligences that had consumed entire civilizations long before the Confederation existed. No one knew where they came from originally. They simply appeared, consumed everything in their path, and moved on. The first sign of trouble came from the outer rim worlds of the Confederation. A routine patrol ship near the Kethta border simply vanished. Then another. Within a week, an entire star system went silent. Ambassador Veldon stood in the same council chamber, where humanity had been rejected 3 years earlier. But now his calm confidence was gone, replaced by something humans would recognize as fear. "The reports are confirmed," he said, his voice trembling slightly. 3 more systems have been completely consumed. No survivors. No trace of what happened except for these energy readings. The holographic display showed patterns of destruction unlike anything the Confederation had seen before. Entire planets had been stripped down to their cores. Their matter converted into something else, something that moved and grew and consumed more. "Impossible," said Xanthic, his crystal body resonating with nervous energy. "Our sensors show no life signs, no technology we recognize. What could do this?" The answer came from the oldest member of the council, a being called the Archive who existed as pure information within a complex computer system. When the Archive spoke, its voice carried the weight of millions of years of recorded history. "They have returned," the Archive said simply. "The Devourers. The ancient enemy. We thought they were destroyed eons ago, but they were only sleeping." Silence fell over the chamber. Even the newest members of the Confederation knew the old stories about the Devourers. They were legendary, the destroyer of the First Empire, the reason why the original galactic civilization had fallen. "How many ships can we mobilize?" asked the Zilani representative, her large eyes wide with terror. "Every ship in the fleet," replied Veldon. "But if the ancient records are accurate, conventional weapons will be useless against them. They adapt to any attack, learn from every encounter. Each battle makes them stronger." The war began in earnest when the Devourers struck at 3 core worlds simultaneously. The Confederation's finest battle fleets rushed to defend them. Confident in their superior technology and careful strategies, it was a massacre. Admiral Zenthro led the defense of Kethter Prime personally, commanding over 1,000 ships equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. His energy cannons could destroy entire mountains. His shields could withstand the explosion of a star. His tactics had been refined over centuries of study. None of it mattered. The Devourer ships were unlike anything in the Confederation database. They looked like massive geometric puzzles, constantly changing shape as they moved. When Zenthro's forces fired their energy weapons, the Devourers absorbed the energy and used it to grow larger. When they tried physical projectiles, the enemy ships simply reformed around the damage. Worse, the Devourers learned from every attack. The second time Zenthro used a particular weapon, it was only half as effective. The third time, it was useless. Within hours, his entire fleet was either destroyed or fleeing in panic. On Kefta Prime, the population watched in horror as enormous machines descended from the sky. These machines didn't just destroy, they converted. Buildings were broken down into their basic atoms and rebuilt into more machines. People, plants, even the soil itself was consumed and transformed. Within 3 days, Kefta Prime was gone. In its place was a massive factory complex producing more. Devourer ships that similar disasters struck at Vorthik Central and New Zelani. The Confederation's most important worlds simply ceased to exist. Their entire populations and resources transformed into the enemy. In the council chamber on Nexus Prime, panic ruled for the first time in thousands of years. Representatives who had never shown emotion beyond mild curiosity now openly wept or raged or sat in stunned silence. "How do we fight an enemy that grows stronger from our attacks?" asked the Vorthik representative, his crystal body flickering with chaotic lights. "The ancient records speak of the old empire's final strategy," said the archive. "They tried to unite all species, all technologies, all methods of warfare. But it was too late. The Devourers had grown too strong." Veldon stared at the tactical displays showing Devourer forces spreading across the galaxy like a plague. Dozens of worlds had already fallen. Millions of ships had been destroyed or converted. The Confederation's careful, logical approach to warfare was proving useless against an enemy that defied all conventional tactics. "Sir," said one of his aides quietly, "we're receiving desperate requests for help from colony worlds throughout the Outer Rim. They want us to evacuate them before the Devourers arrive." "How many ships do we have available for evacuation?" Veldon asked. "Not enough. Not nearly enough." As if the situation couldn't get worse, intelligence reports began arriving about the Devourers' true capabilities. They didn't just consume matter, they consumed information. Every ship they destroyed, every person they converted, added to their collective knowledge. They were learning about Confederation technology, tactics, and weaknesses at an incredible rate. "At this rate," said the Zelani representative, "they'll reach the core worlds within months. Maybe weeks. Them we need to consider." "Alternative strategies," Veldon said slowly. "What do you mean?" asked Azantic. Veldon was quiet for a long moment, staring at the displays showing the expanding zone of destruction. Finally, he spoke words that would have been unthinkable just days before. "Perhaps it's time to contact the humans." The suggestion caused an uproar. Several representatives protested immediately. "The humans are primitives," said the Vorthik representative. "They know nothing of advanced warfare. Their emotional instability would be a liability in any coordinated defense," added another, but Veldon raised his hand for silence. "Our advanced warfare has failed. Our coordinated defense has failed. Perhaps," he paused, the words difficult to say, "perhaps primitive thinking is what we need." The debate continued for hours, but the reality of their situation was impossible to ignore. The Confederation was losing badly, and conventional solutions weren't working. Some representatives argued for retreating to the core worlds and making a final stand. Others wanted to try to negotiate with the Devourers, though no one knew if such beings could even be reasoned with. In the end, desperation won. The Council authorized sending a coded message to Earth, carefully disguised as a demand for tribute, rather than a plea for help. They couldn't bring themselves to admit openly that they needed help from the species they had. Rejected as too primitive for membership, but they needed something, anything, because if they didn't find a new approach soon, the galaxy itself would. become nothing but food for an ancient hunger that could never be satisfied. The message traveled through space toward a small blue planet where 8 billion humans continued their chaotic, emotional, primitive lives, unaware that the fate of the galaxy might soon rest in their unpredictable hands. The message from the Galactic Confederation arrived at Earth on a Tuesday morning. President Maria Santos sat in her office in Geneva, reading the decoded transmission for the third time. Around her, military advisors and scientists tried to make sense of what they were seeing. "Let me understand this correctly," said General Thompson, a veteran of the Martian Independence War. "The same aliens who told us we were too primitive and dangerous are now asking for our help?" "Not asking," corrected Dr. Chun, who had been called in from his research facility. "The message is phrased as a demand for tribute. But reading between the lines, they're desperate." Admiral Okafor studied the tactical data that had been included with the message. The Devourer's advance across the galaxy was shown in red, spreading like an infection. Entire star systems had gone dark. Billions of lives had been lost. "These enemy ships," she said, pointing at the holographic displays. "They adapt to whatever weapons are used against them. That's why the Confederation is losing so badly. Their whole strategy depends on using the same proven weapons and tactics over and over." President Santos looked around the room. "Opinions? We should ignore them," said Senator Rodriguez through a video link from Luna City. "They rejected us. They called us dangerous primitives. Let them solve their own problems." "With respect, Senator," said Dr. Chun, "if these devourers consume the entire galaxy, they'll eventually come for us too. Earth won't be safe forever." Admiral Okafor nodded. "Dr. Chun is right. Better to fight them now while we have potential allies, rather than face them alone later." General Thompson crossed his arms. "Even if we wanted to help, what could we do? Our fleet is tiny compared to theirs. We've got maybe 200 ships capable of deep space travel. They had thousands and still got crushed." "Numbers aren't everything," said President Santos quietly. "What do we have that they don't?" The room fell silent as everyone considered the question. Finally, Admiral Okafor spoke up. "Chaos," she said. "We're unpredictable. The aliens all think the same way. Logical, careful, organized. These devourer machines probably think the same way too. They learn from patterns, adapt to repeated tactics. But what if there are no patterns to learn from?" President Santos smiled. "Elaborate, Admiral." "Human military doctrine has always emphasized flexibility and individual initiative. We train our commanders to think on their feet, to break the rules when necessary. Every human ship captain is used to making decisions without waiting for orders from headquarters." Dr. Chun's eyes lit up. "The Confederation's weakness is their greatest strength turned against them. They're so organized, so coordinated, that they can't adapt quickly to new situations. But humans are naturally chaotic," finished General Thompson, beginning to smile. "We're used to nothing going according to plan." The debate in the Earth Senate took 3 days. Protests erupted in major cities around the world. Many people felt that humanity owed the Confederation nothing after their humiliating rejection. Others argued that helping was morally right. Regardless of past insults, in the end, President Santos made the decision herself. "We're going to help them," she announced to the world. "Not because they deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do. And because someday, when our children ask what we did when the galaxy was in danger, I want to be able to say we stood up and fought." Captain Marcus Webb received his orders while his ship was docked at Ceres Station. The Un's Defiant was one of the new design ships, fast, tough, and built for a crew of only 30 people. Webb's crew was handpicked from veterans of various Earth conflicts, people who were used to thinking for themselves under pressure. "So we're really doing this," said Lieutenant Commander Patel, his second-in-command. "Flying halfway across the galaxy to help aliens who hate us." "They don't hate us," said Webb, studying the star charts. "They're just scared of us. There's a difference." The human task force consisted of 50 ships, everything Earth could spare for such a dangerous mission. Admiral Okafor commanded from the flagship, Ons Perseverance, the same ship that had carried the first diplomatic mission 3 years earlier. The journey to Vekaran took 2 weeks. This was a Confederation world that was making its last stand against the Devourers. According to intelligence reports, the planet held over 1 billion civilians who couldn't be evacuated in time when the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The sight that greeted them was devastating. The space around Vekaran was filled with wreckage. Thousands of destroyed Confederation ships floating like metal snow. The surviving defenders had formed a defensive sphere around the planet, but their formation was already showing gaps. "Incoming transmission," reported the communications officer. "It's Admiral Zenthro of the Kethter fleet." The alien commander appeared on screen, his shadowy form flickering with stress. "Human vessels, you are ordered to take position in the rear support formation. You will provide cover for our evacuation ships only. Do not engage the enemy directly." Admiral Okafor kept her expression neutral. "Understood, Admiral. We'll follow your orders." But Captain Webb was studying the tactical displays, watching the Devourer ships approach. There were dozens of them, geometric shapes that seemed to shift and flow as they moved. The Confederation forces were firing everything they had. But the energy beams were being absorbed, and the physical projectiles were having no effect. "Sir," said his tactical officer, "I'm seeing something odd. When the enemy ships absorb energy, there's a tiny delay, maybe 1/10 of a second, where they stop moving forward. And when they reshape to avoid projectiles, they always reform in the most efficient configuration." Webb nodded slowly. "They're thinking like machines. Logical, predictable. What would happen if we did something that made no logical sense, sir?" "All ships," Webb announced on the command frequency. "This is Defiant. I'm seeing patterns in enemy behavior. Request permission to test a theory." "Negative, Captain Webb," came Admiral Zenthro's sharp reply. "Maintain your assigned position." Webb looked at his crew. They all knew that look. "Sorry, Admiral," he said, cutting the communication. "All human ships, follow my lead. We're going to do something stupid." The Defiant broke formation and accelerated directly toward the largest Devourer ship. But instead of firing weapons or following any recognizable attack pattern, Webb ordered random course changes. Up, down, left, right, spinning and rolling with no apparent purpose. "Sir," called the tactical officer, "the enemy ship is slowing down. It's trying to predict our next move, but it can't. Now." Webb shouted, "All weapons, full spread, but target different spots on random intervals." The human weapons weren't as powerful as Confederation energy cannons, but they were different. Kinetic rounds, plasma bursts, and missile warheads hit the Devourer ship from multiple angles in no recognizable pattern. The enemy tried to adapt, but couldn't predict where the next attack would come from. For the first time in months of warfare, a Devourer ship took significant damage. All human ships. Admiral Okafor's voice rang across the communication channels. "Follow Captain Webb's example. Random attack patterns. No coordination. Trust your instincts." The battle that followed would be remembered as the turning point of the war. 50 human ships, each acting independently, swarmed around the Devourer fleet like angry wasps. They broke every rule of space combat, attacked from impossible angles, and changed tactics so often that the machine intelligences couldn't keep up. The Confederation forces watched in amazement as their primitive allies did what? Thousands of their own ships couldn't. They actually hurt the enemy. Impossible, whispered Admiral Zenthro, watching as another Devourer ship was torn apart by chaotic human attacks. Their tactics make no sense. They're fighting without coordination, without logic. Maybe that's exactly what we need, said one of his subordinates quietly. The battle ended with the Devourers retreating for the first time since the war began. They had lost 3 ships and couldn't understand why their adaptation protocols had failed. The humans had lost only 2 ships, both to lucky shots rather than superior enemy strategy. As the human fleet regrouped, Captain Webb found himself facing Admiral Zenthro on the main communication channel. The alien commander's shadowy form seemed different somehow, less arrogant, more thoughtful. Captain Webb, Zenthro said slowly, your tactics violated every principle of civilized warfare. Yes, sir, they did, Webb replied cheerfully. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and completely without strategic sense. That's right, sir. Zenthro was quiet for a long moment. They were also the first effective weapon we found against the enemy. How did you know it would work? Webb grinned. We didn't, sir. That's the point. Sometimes the best strategy is to not have a strategy at all. For the first time in his 1,000-year military career, Admiral Zenthro began to wonder if there might be something to learn from these chaotic, emotional, primitive humans after all. The victory at Dekaran sent shockwaves through the Galactic Confederation. For the first time since the war began, they had not just survived a Devourer attack, they had won. The news spread quickly through the remaining inhabited systems, giving hope to billions of terrified civilians. But hope was a fragile thing, and not everyone was ready to embrace humanity's contribution. Admiral Okafor stood in the war room on Nexus Prime, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas under Devourer control, which now covered nearly a third of known space. Yellow zones showed contested areas where fighting continued. The small patches of green representing safe Confederation territory were shrinking every day. The human tactics were effective at Dekaran, admitted Fleet Admiral Zenthro, his voice carefully neutral. However, we cannot build our entire strategy around such chaotic methods. Ambassador Veldon nodded in agreement. The humans will serve as auxiliary forces only. Their unpredictable nature makes them unsuitable for coordinated operations with our main fleets. Admiral Okafor kept her temper in check. 3 months had passed since the battle at Dekaran, and human forces had been involved in 17 more engagements. They had won 12 of them outright and helped turn the tide in 4 others. Only once had they been forced to retreat, and even then they had inflicted heavy damage on the enemy. But the Confederation leadership still treated them like dangerous animals that happened to be useful. With respect, Admiral, Okafor said, our methods work because they're unpredictable. The Devourers learn from repetition, but they can't learn from chaos. Every time your forces use the same tactics, the enemy gets better at countering them. Order and discipline win wars, replied Zenthro firmly. Not random violence. The meeting was interrupted by urgent alarms. A junior officer burst into the room, his crystalline body flashing with panic. Fleet Admiral. Emergency transmission from the outer defense grid. The Devourers are launching a massive assault. 6 core worlds simultaneously. The room erupted into controlled chaos as displays updated with incoming reports. The scale of the attack was beyond anything seen before. Hundreds of Devourer ships were approaching Kethter Secondary, New Vorthok, Solani Prime, and 3 other major worlds. Each attack force was larger than the entire fleet that had been defeated at Dekaran. Impossible, breathed Veldon. How did they coordinate such a massive operation without our sensors detecting the buildup? Admiral Okafor studied the tactical displays with growing dread. They learned from our success at Dekaran. They're adapting their strategy, hitting multiple targets so we can't concentrate our forces. All fleets are to respond according to Protocol 7, ordered Zenthro. Defensive formations around each threatened world. Maintain communication with Central Command at all times. Sir, Okafor interrupted, Protocol 7 won't work against this many ships. You'll be spread too thin, and the Devourers will overwhelm each defense force separately. Admiral Okafor, Zenthro's voice was cold. You will take your ships to Zilani Prime and provide support to the defense fleet there. Nothing more. As the human ships jumped to their assigned position, Captain Webb watched the main Confederation fleet preparing for battle. Everything was perfectly organized, ships in precise formations, weapons charged and ready, communications flowing smoothly between vessels. It's like watching a beautiful machine, said Lieutenant Commander Patel. Too bad it's the wrong machine for this job. The battle at Zilani Prime began exactly as Admiral Okafor had predicted. The Confederation forces formed their textbook defensive sphere around the planet, weapons pointed outward in perfect coordination. When the Devourers arrived, the defenders fired in precise volleys, their energy beams lighting up space like a deadly fireworks display. It was magnificent. It was disciplined. It was exactly what the Devourers had learned to counter. The enemy ships absorbed the energy attacks and grew larger. When the defenders switched to kinetic weapons, the Devourers simply reformed to avoid damage. Within an hour, the perfect formation began to collapse as ships were destroyed or forced to retreat. Human vessels, came the desperate call from the Zilani fleet commander. Request immediate assistance. All ships, Admiral Okafor broadcast to her fleet. You know what to do. Random patterns, independent action, make them guess. The human ships dove into the battle like hawks attacking a flock of pigeons. Each captain chose their own targets, their own approach, their own timing. The Devourers tried to adapt, but every time they adjusted to counter one human ship's tactics, 3 others were doing something completely different. For a few precious hours, it looked like the humans might save Zilani Prime single-handedly. But there were simply too many Devourer ships, and the human fleet was too small to be everywhere at once. The end came when Admiral Okafor's flagship was caught between 2 Devourer vessels. The Perseverance fought valiantly, but her ship was designed for speed and flexibility, not prolonged combat against overwhelming odds. As her shields failed and hull breaches spread throughout the ship, Okafor gave the order to abandon ship. Captain Webb's Defiant swooped in to rescue survivors, but they could only save a fraction of the crew. Admiral Okafor herself was among those lost when the Perseverance exploded. Similar disasters unfolded across the galaxy. Despite human assistance, 5 of the 6 attacked worlds fell to the Devourers. Only Kethter Secondary survived, and that was barely. The Confederation had lost over half its remaining fleet in a single day. In the aftermath, blame flew like shrapnel through the council chambers. Some representatives blamed the humans for not following orders. Others blamed Admiral Zenthro for not using human tactics more effectively. But the truth was simpler and more terrible than anyone wanted to admit. They were losing the war. Captain Webb found himself promoted to admiral overnight, simply because most of the senior human officers were dead. He stood before the Confederation Council, still wearing a uniform stained with smoke and blood from the evacuation of Admiral Okafor's crew. The situation is clear, announced Velden, his usually calm voice cracking with strain. The Devourers are adapting to our combined tactics. They're learning to counter human unpredictability by overwhelming us with numbers. Then we need a new approach, said Webb quietly. Such as? Webb looked around the chamber at the alien faces staring at him. Some showed fear, others anger, A few displayed what might have been hope. "Stop trying to control everything," he said. "Your whole military doctrine is based on central command, careful coordination, and following established protocols. The protocols are just patterns, and the devourers learn patterns. You're suggesting we abandon military discipline entirely?" asked Xanthic, his crystal body flickering with agitation. "I'm suggesting we trust our people to make good decisions without being told exactly what to do," Webb replied. "Give ship captains the authority to act on their own judgment. Let them choose their own targets, their own tactics, their own timing. Make the entire fleet as unpredictable as possible." The chamber erupted in protests. "Impossible. It would be chaos. Ships would fire on each other by mistake. No military force can function without proper command structure." But Veldon raised his hand for silence. "What you're describing," he said slowly, "is not military organization. It's anarchy." "Maybe," Webb admitted, "but organized anarchy might be our only chance." The debate continued for hours, but the reality of their situation was undeniable. The Confederation had tried everything else and failed. Traditional tactics, superior technology, careful strategy. None of it worked against an enemy that learned from every encounter. Finally, with the Devourers less than 2 weeks away from Nexus Prime itself, the Council made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months before. "Admiral Webb," said Veldon formally, "by emergency authority of the Galactic Confederation Council, you are hereby granted supreme command of all military forces for the defense of Nexus Prime." Webb felt the weight of billions of lives settling on his shoulders. Around him, alien faces watched with expressions ranging from hope to terror to resignation. He was about to gamble the fate of galactic civilization on the idea that sometimes the best plan was to have no plan at all. "Thank you for your trust," he said simply. "Let's hope human chaos is enough to save us all." Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Uns Indomitable, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for battle. Ships from 12 different species floated in space around Nexus Prime. Kethter shadow vessels, Vorthic crystal ships, Zilani biomechanical cruisers, and dozens of other designs that human eyes had never seen before. But for the first time in Confederation history, these ships weren't arranged in perfect formations. Instead, they moved in loose groups, each captain given only basic objectives and told to use their own judgment for everything else. "Sir," reported Commander Chun from the tactical station, "final count shows 3,200 ships ready for battle. The Devourers are approaching with approximately 4,000 vessels." "Numbers don't matter today," Webb replied. "What matters is that we're thinking like individuals instead of like a machine." The past 2 weeks had been intense. Webb had worked with alien commanders who had never operated without detailed orders from Central Command. Many of them were terrified of making decisions without approval from higher authority. Others were angry at being asked to abandon tactics that had served their species for thousands of years, but desperate. Times had a way of changing minds. Captain Velkith of the Kethter cruiser Shadow Dance had been one of the most resistant to human methods. His species prized logical thinking and careful planning above all else. The idea of acting on instinct rather than calculation went against everything he believed. "This is madness," he had told Webb during the strategy meetings. "You're asking us to fight like barbarians." "No," Webb had replied patiently. "I'm asking you to fight like individuals. There's a difference." Now, as the Devourers approached, Velkith found himself in command of his ship with only the simplest of orders: protect the civilians, hurt the enemy, and trust his crew to make good choices. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. The enemy fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a plague of geometric nightmares. The Devourer ships had grown even larger since the last battle, fed by the matter of conquered worlds. Some were the size of small moons, their surfaces crawling with mechanical constructions that defied understanding. "All ships," Webb announced on the General Communication Channel. "You know what we're fighting for. Every person on every world behind us is counting on us to stop this threat. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Figure it out yourselves, and remember, the enemy learns from patterns. So don't give them any patterns to learn from." The battle began not with coordinated volleys or careful maneuvers, but with what could only be described as controlled chaos. 3,000 ships scattered in 3,000 different directions, each captain choosing their own approach to the enemy. Captain Sarah Martinez of the human destroyer Valkyrie decided to test a theory she'd been thinking about for weeks. Instead of attacking the Devourer ships directly, she targeted the space around them, filling it with debris and radiation that would interfere with their sensors. Captain Velka surprised himself by choosing to work with Martinez, using his ship's stealth capabilities to approach through the interference she was creating. Together, they managed to inflict serious damage on a Devourer vessel before it could adapt to their combined attack. But it was Captain Chun of the UNS Indomitable who provided the moment that would be remembered for generations. Chun was Elena Vasquez's nephew, named after the communications officer who had served on the original diplomatic mission. He commanded a mid-sized human cruiser that had seen action in 17 previous battles. His ship was fast but not particularly well-armed compared to the massive alien vessels around him. When Chun saw a group of Devourer ships surrounding a Kethter hospital ship full of civilian refugees, he didn't hesitate. He didn't call for backup or wait for orders from Admiral Webb. He simply accelerated his ship to maximum speed and rammed straight into the largest Devourer vessel. The Indomitable shields held just long enough to punch through the enemy's outer hull before exploding in a burst of atomic fire. The Devourer ship, damaged beyond its ability to self-repair, began to break apart. The hospital ship escaped with its precious cargo of lives. "Did you see that?" whispered Captain Velkith to his crew. "That human. He sacrificed everything to save people he had never met." Similar acts of individual heroism were happening throughout the battle. Alien captains who had never acted without direct orders found themselves making split-second decisions to save their comrades. Ships that would normally retreat when damaged instead pressed forward, knowing that their sacrifice might give others a chance. The Devourers, for all their technological superiority, couldn't understand what they were seeing. Their machine intelligence was designed to learn from patterns and predict behavior based on logic. But there was no logic to a ship ramming an enemy 10 times its size to save strangers. There was no pattern to captains choosing to fight to the death rather than retreat to safety. "They're not adapting fast enough," reported the tactical officer on Admiral Webb's flagship. "The enemy is having trouble processing the emotional motivations behind our actions." Webb nodded, watching the displays show individual ships across the fleet making their own decisions about when to attack, when to retreat, when to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. It was messy and chaotic and completely unpredictable. Exactly what they needed. The turning point came when the largest Devourer mothership, a machine the size of a small asteroid, began converting the wreckage of destroyed ships into more weapons. The logical response would have been to retreat and regroup. Instead, Captain Torres of the Vorthek crystal ship Harmony chose to do something that violated every principle of sound military thinking. She flew her ship directly into the conversion beam. The crystal structure of Vorthek ships was based on resonance frequencies. When Torres overloaded her ship's harmonic systems while inside the Devourer's conversion field, the resulting feedback destroyed not just the mothership, but created a chain reaction that disabled dozens of nearby enemy vessels. Impossible, breathed Admiral Zenthro, watching from his command ship. She couldn't have calculated the resonance patterns needed for that effect. The mathematics are too complex. She didn't calculate anything, Webb replied. She just trusted her instincts and got lucky. Sometimes that's enough. But it wasn't just luck. Across the battlefield, alien crews were discovering something that humans had always known, that the heart and the gut could sometimes find solutions that the mind couldn't calculate. A Zeolani captain used her species' natural empathy to coordinate with other ships without using traditional communications. A Kethter commander ignored tactical doctrine and attacked based on what felt right. Rather than what the computers recommended, the Devourers began to retreat for the second time in their ancient history. They had lost over half their fleet to an enemy that made no sense to them. Every time they tried to predict human behavior, the humans did something unexpected. Every time they adapted to alien tactics, the aliens changed their approach. Most confusing of all was the way these organic beings kept sacrificing themselves for abstract concepts like duty, honor, and love. The machine intelligence couldn't process the idea that individuals would willingly destroy themselves not for logical gain, but for emotional satisfaction. As the surviving Devourer ships limped away into deep space, the combined fleet regrouped around Nexus Prime. The casualty reports were sobering. Over 1,000 ships had been lost, including hundreds of captains who had chosen to ram enemy vessels rather than retreat. But they had won. More importantly, they had won by working together as individuals rather than as a coordinated machine. In the aftermath, Admiral Webb found himself standing in the same council chamber where humanity had been rejected 5 years earlier. But this time, the alien representatives rose to their feet as he entered. Captain Velkith was there, his shadow-like form somehow radiating respect. Captain Torres's second-in-command represented the Vorthok, her crystal body resonating with harmonics of gratitude. Admiral Webb, said Ambassador Veldon, the Galactic Confederation wishes to formally apologize for our past judgment of humanity. We called you primitive, but we were the ones who were too primitive to understand true strength. We also wish to offer humanity full membership in the Confederation, added Xanthic. Not as junior partners, but as equal members with full rights and privileges. Webb looked around the chamber at faces that had once shown only contempt for his species. Now he saw respect, admiration, and something that might have been awe. Thank you, he said simply. But I think we need to change more than just membership policies. The old Confederation was built on the idea that logic and order were supreme. But this war taught us that sometimes chaos and emotion are more powerful than any computer. What are you suggesting? Asked Veldon. A new kind of alliance. One that values individual thinking as much as group coordination. One that sees emotion not as a weakness, but as a strength that can't be calculated or predicted by machines. The discussions that followed would reshape galactic civilization. The rigid hierarchies that had defined alien societies for millennia began to give way to more flexible structures that encouraged individual initiative,